Welcome back to the Means Report. We appreciate you staying with us. Election season is upon us. I can't believe it. It feels like the year just began, and now we have a big election coming up on May 21st. As I mentioned, a huge one in November, obviously. And so we wanted to talk to the executive director of the Richmond County Board of Elections. It's Travis Doss, no stranger to anyone in this community. He works so hard on behalf of not just the voters, but everybody. Travis, thank you for being with me.
Well, thank you, Brad. Thanks for having me. As you know, this is a busy season, so we appreciate the invite.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I sit up here on the news each night and I see you almost every night, and you give great information, but it's in a limited soundbite form. That's how the news works. And so I wanted just to have more of a conversation today. And we'll start, folks, just by going through some quick topics. Many of you may think they're basic, but many of us don't know these things. And it starts with who can vote. I always thought once you turned 18, everybody gets to go have a say in the process. Is that true? Once you're 18, anybody can go to the polls?
Well, yes and no. You do have to be a registered voter.
Okay.
And there are certain requirements to being a registered voter. You have to be, a resident of the state. You have to reside in the county where you register. But as long as you are registered, then yes, you are eligible to vote. The nice thing is that most people will register to vote when they get their driver's license. It's an automatic registration.
That's
so
right.
It's a very easy process, but you do have to at least get registered.
What if there's a change, Travis? What if someone's last name changes? Can they say, oh, I didn't have time to go get a new driver's license or whatnot? Can they still go vote?
Certainly. If they're still registered, yes. Name changes, address changes, things like that. So as long as they are registered, we verify the information to make sure they are who they say they are, but yes, they are able to vote.
Does somebody's voter registration ever expire?
As long as you're voting, as long as you continue to maintain contact with our office, no, it does not. We will occasionally do some list maintenance activities where we may do a confirmation mailing to verify that you are still living here. But as long as you respond to those mailings, you're good to go.
And so if I understood you correctly from one of your first answers, if I move to another district, or certainly if I move to another state, one must re-register.
That is correct. I mean, a lot of people will register to vote and then they will move. They're still eligible to vote, but the important thing is you want to be registered where you live, so you'll be voting on the actual people who represent you.
Can dead people or children vote? We hear about that, these conspiracy theorists perhaps, and maybe it's not in some areas. Can they vote, or can I take their card and go vote?
So we do list maintenance activities. We check vital records. We check the daily obituaries. So we do want to try and keep our rolls as clean as possible.
Okay, fine.
I won't say it's an impossibility, but you do have to present some type of ID when you vote. So unless you're actively trying to commit fraud, then pretty much dead people don't vote.
Can people see who you voted for? Can I go to a website and go, oh, I see how old Brad voted?
No, so your vote is a secret private vote. A person can look up to see if you voted, and in primaries, they could even look to see what party's primary you voted in. But how you voted or who you voted for is protected information. I couldn't even tell you who you voted for.
Walk me through the process of having to declare which political party you're voting for. That makes a lot of people uncomfortable. They'd rather just show their driver's license and go have that privacy you mentioned. Why do we have to tell the folks that?
Well, we are in a two-party system, and so with this election we have coming up as a primary. So you do have to choose a party's ballot. You're not registered by party in Georgia like in some other states. In Georgia, it's a choice every time there's a primary. So we had the primary in March, whether you chose Democrat or Republican back then. In May, you have a choice again. It doesn't follow you, it doesn't continue on. And then in November, which is the general election, both parties will appear on the ballot, and there isn't a choice. You can just pick and choose as you go through the ballot. Okay,
so for this election, the big one coming up in November, could I vote for Biden in the primary, Trump in the general?
Well, yes, absolutely.
You could do that.
Absolutely. Well, the primary that we had in March was it was called the presidential preference primary. So it's just deciding who you want to see in November. The same applies with in November. You could vote for the Democratic president, but the Republican senator. I mean, it's up to you. You don't have to stick with one party through the majority of the ballot.
Okay, that's helpful. What about what goes on your end? I cannot imagine what you have to undertake to pull this off. it's a lot more than just making sure the machines function, I'm guessing. What about staffing, venues, and other things that you have to do to let us vote?
Right. Well, it's a very long process. It's a lot of people assume that we only work on one day a year.
Right.
You know, it's quite insulting. But you know, there's a testing process. Every single machine that we send out to the polling places have to be tested. We have to do a sampling of the ballots. We have to scan all them to make sure that the scanners are functioning properly. And we send out over 500 machines. So it takes 2 or 3 weeks to do all of that. Currently in Richmond County, we have 43 polling places. So we have to make sure that all those polling places are open. We have to deliver all the equipment before Election Day, and then the day after the election, we have to pick all that equipment up again. So it is about a 3-month process prior to Election Day, making sure that everything is ready to go.
What about the election workers themselves? They're wonderful at my precinct. I'm sure that's the same at every one in Richmond County and Columbia County and every county for that matter. Where do they come from? Are they paid?
They are paid. We have a wonderful, dedicated poll working staff in Richmond County. You hear horror stories from other counties across the state that they have trouble recruiting poll workers. Our poll workers for Richmond County love it. I mean, they come back every time. And that's not an easy process either. They have to attend a training session that's about 3 hours long, so it's not an easy process. And then they have to show up at the polls at 5:30 in the morning, and then they don't leave until close to 8:30 that night. So it's a very, very long day. Yes, they get paid, but as I like to tell anyone who comes to training, if you're here to make money, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
it's basically a stipend. It's a thank you for your hard day's work.
And they all have such wonderful attitudes. What about early voting? I remember, I think, when we all voted on Election Day. Where'd this early voting come from and why?
Well, the early voting period started was because there were a lot of people that were not able to get to the polls on Election Day. So they extended the period of time. So now in Georgia, we have 3 weeks of early voting and 2 Saturdays. For Richmond County, we actually included a Sunday in that as well. So you have actually 18 days prior to the election. And we're also very fortunate in Richmond County that we have 4 locations that are also open. So you can go to any one of the 4 locations between the hours of 8:30 and 6 and cast your ballot prior to Election Day.
Travis, I have so many questions to get to. Jarrett tells me our time is drawing near. Let me say this, the ballot questions. Where do our answers to those questions go? Do they help affect policy in any way? Why are those things on there?
Usually both parties will present what they call straw poll questions, opinion questions. Then they will take the answers from those questions and they will probably try and influence laws, legislators, and whatnot with the answers from those questions. But many people think that they're binding, and they're not. They're just opinion questions. They're asking your opinion, whether or not you want this, yes or no.
Why can't, with today's technology, when the polls close at 7, y'all just mash a button and tell everybody the results? Everything else is so instantaneous in our society. Why can't it be that way with elections?
Because of security. We want to make sure that all the security features are double checked. So we have to double check the total number of ballots that printed on the machine, total number of ballots that were scanned in the machine, the total number of people who showed up that day. Once that is verified, then there's a memory card in the tabulator that has to be brought to a central computer that is not connected to the internet, that has no other connectivity. So it's just a long process to verify all the paperwork and make sure that all the numbers are correct.
Probably 2 more questions, and this one might not be answerable, so feel free to not answer it. But we have a big issue to me it's a big issue this time around, whether the mayor of Augusta should get to vote on all commission matters, not just in the event of a tiebreaker. Can you tell if that's driving more people to the polls so far?
It's hard to say. I know that there have been a lot of debate about it, but I think that that's one of the nice things about this election is there's a lot of local issues on the ballot. There are 5 commissioners that are also on the ballot. So I think whenever you have local candidates, local issues, that definitely is driving the people to the polls.
Probably my last question. What's a good turnout? Sometimes I'll hear you on TV say, well, we're expecting 35%, and it makes me sad. What's a good turnout in your opinion?
100%, of course.
Right, 100%.
But, yeah, you know, if you can do more than 50%, you're having a really good day. Even in presidential elections, Richmond County has sort of been in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Most presidential elections, you see between 70 and 80%. We're in the 60% range. So it really, if we could get on especially on a primary, especially during the summer, it's hard to get people out to vote. So 40% in a primary would be considered a good turnout.
Well, we'll keep an eye out for those numbers between now and May 21st, and we will continue to thank you for all you and your team do. Travis Doss, thank you.
Thank you, Brad. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Travis Doss, he is the Executive Director of the Richmond County Board of Elections, extremely busy right now, but still found time for us on the Means Report. When we come back, who else would you like to see on this broadcast? We'll show you how to stay in touch in a moment.